Welcome to episode number 21 of the Introvert Biz Growth Podcast, the show where I talk to introverts who grow their business and make a difference. I don't have a guest today, it's just me again, so I'd like to talk to you about public speaking for introverts, comfort zones, and saying no. And with the saying no part, I'll actually also share a specific example. So these are three topics that I want to cover today. First of all, public speaking. Over the different episodes, the different conversations I had with guests, actually what I realized is that I always thought that all introverts hated public speaking. But via these conversations, I found out that there's actually quite a big number of introverts that actually love it. They don't just, embrace it, but they actually embrace it and love it. So one of my previous guests, Ian Anderson Gray, and also three upcoming guests, Janet Murray, Claire Desira, and Mark Schaefer, have actually made speaking part of their career. That's how much they love it or embrace it. So yeah, these are all examples of introverts that do like public speaking. And I find that fascinating and wanted to analyze it a bit more. So maybe what we can do is talk about my personal public speaking experience first. So what I know is that I'm comfortable with about, let's say, up to 50 people, I'd say. Anything beyond that number, and I don't sleep a week before the event. Well, maybe not a week, but at least 3 nights before. Just completely a mess. My stomach hurts, and I have insomnia. So, that's what I noticed. That's my comfort zone. And we'll talk about comfort zones after. And it wasn't always like that. I actually started out with just being comfortable with 15 or 20 people. And then slowly that number kind of grew and expanded. And I realized, that actually whether it's 30 people or 50 people, the difference isn't that much bigger. But so that's what I'm comfortable with. And funnily enough, if you give me a webinar with 400 participants, I'm totally fine. I'm at home in my home office, and I guess I'm in my comfort zone because, well, I'm comfy at home. It's my, regular surroundings. I don't see the people either, so that makes a big difference. Because I don't feel like they're judging me. I'm just giving, my best content and my best advice. So it's very interesting how that is different between, a live public speaking event and an online webinar for me. So how come, if I'm an introvert and these other people are introverts, how come some introverts are actually thriving on stage? So when I asked them this question, so these introverts who are, doing very well on stage, they often brought up the parallel between playing an instrument on stage. And that sounded like it was okay because they were in charge. So it was their thing and they, it was their plan and they were in charge. They obviously knew, well, if you take music, they knew their notes and they knew their play. If you take the public speaking event, they knew their content. So they were totally in charge. And B, they are obviously very passionate about the topic. So if it's music, they were just very passionate about sharing this music. If it's the event, if it's the public speaking gig, well, they're very passionate about the topic that they were talking about. So they also admitted, though, that in most cases, they were completely drained after the speech and didn't feel like going into the crowd for networking, but tried to find a more intimate way to connect with the audience. For example, going to an organized dinner with just a few selected participants. So it seems like they can kind of step into that zone where they're in the spotlight, but actually found it much more difficult to then, go back to the crowd and mingle. Yeah, so that's kind of what I've noticed as well for me personally, is that if I'm given the choice between a networking event or a speaking event. So where I'm the speaker, I have 30 or 40 minutes to speak about, well, usually it's LinkedIn because that's usually what people ask me to speak about. Then I'd always prefer the speaking event because, again, I guess I'm in charge. I'm passionate about the topic. I don't need to mingle. I don't need to go up to people and say, to make small talk. What do you do? Where are you from? All that good stuff. So people actually, if they want to talk to me, well, they come to me after the event and we talk about LinkedIn, obviously. So we don't start, who are you? What do you do? They already know me. And it gives me also this impression of efficiency. Because I know that if I go as the speaker, well, immediately I get an audience of 30 to 50 people. Where if I go to a networking event, even though there might be more people, I know myself that I'll probably get to talk to maybe 2 to 5 people, never more, and sometimes none. So this kind of feeling of efficiency and productivity makes the investment in that time and in actually getting me to say yes to a speaking event so much more, makes it much more easy. So that's kind of what I've analyzed. But yet, even if I'm totally passionate about the topic that I'm going to be talking about, I would still be intimidated by a large crowd. It's just not my thing. It's outside of my comfort zone. Which brings me to the next topic, and that is comfort zones. We hear it all the time, and we say, you should step out of your comfort zone to reach your most aggressive goals. Well, see what I just did here? I mentioned the word aggressive in the same sentence as stepping out of your comfort zone, because that's what it feels like to me. It's a very aggressive approach of doing business. Yeah, it gives me the chills when I just think about it. And Beth Bulow, who's been a guest on the podcast in a previous episode, she's the founder of theintrovertentrepreneur.com, and she has a great podcast that you should listen to as well, likes to talk about expanding your capacity zone instead. So she's not talking about stepping outside of your comfort zone, but instead says you should expand your capacity zone. And doesn't that sound already much less aggressive? As an introvert, I really need my comfort zone. That's where I do my best work. That's where I shine. So why the heck would I want to step out of that comfy and yet very effective zone? So Beth explains that the capacity zone, well, actually, I have a quote here that I would just want to quote a paragraph from her blog. So she explains the capacity zone like this. Recognizing that there's still a need for an expression that indicates we're growing, I propose stretching our capacity zone. I want to expand what I'm capable of doing and being by using the word capacity and acknowledging that I have certain skills and gifts. It recognizes that I have inherent strengths. I'm perhaps not using them to full capacity, and that's where expansion can happen. I like that so much better because, first of all, it's not a negative statement, but a positive one. And second, it appeals to me because of the growth approach, building up on something that already exists and making it better. To give you an example, stepping outside of my comfort zone would be to accept a speaking engagement in front of 150 people. Very scary. Expanding my capacity zone would be to accept a speaking engagement of up to, let's say, 70 to 80 people. I would still feel like I'm growing because, as I explained before, my comfort zone is probably about 50 people. But it would be a gradual growth, not throwing me completely into cold water, which is what stepping outside of your comfort zone feels like to me. So I would be expanding my capacity zone because I'm slowly growing, but not being completely thrown into the cold water. As I mentioned in the beginning, I also wanted to talk to you about saying no, because as you know, I have a free guide on my website. So if you go to sarahsantacroce.com/saying no, you can download that free guide. But before I do that, I want to leave you with a few questions concerning your comfort or capacity zone, whether it is for public speaking or another area of your business. So ask yourself what's in your comfort zone, which means that you're really good at it and want to do more of. And then what kind of skills fall into your current capacity zone? So these are skills that you could expand if you feel inclined to do so. Ask yourself those two questions. When planning for my year, I had written down things I want to do more of and things I want to do less of, 2 lists. And public speaking were one of the things I wanted to do less of, unless they were paid. That's right. You throw me outside of my comfort zone, well, at least pay me good money to do that. Which brings me to the saying no part. Once you know what's in your comfort zone and what's outside of it, and which skills you actually do want to focus on and develop, it's relatively easy to say no when opportunities come your way that are on your want to do less of list. I'm saying relatively easy because unfortunately there's this thing called our ego that sometimes steps into our way. Let me explain. I got this offer about 2 weeks ago. So this guy contacted me to talk about social selling at his conference in Geneva. And so this is really the top conference about digital marketing in Switzerland. So, of course, my ego stepped in and I was flattered to be contacted as the person who knows about social selling. But at the same time, immediately my brain went into anxiety mode and I actually considered saying no straight away. I'm like, this is out of my comfort zone. I don't want to be there. So I'm just going to say no. But after talking to my friend and colleague, Valerie, I decided to at least talk to him. And so I gave him a call and I immediately explained that, these conferences are not really my thing and that I'm actually more comfortable with smaller groups. So he suggested that I actually bring along a partner who could do the presentation with me. And I thought that was a good idea because, again, that would have probably helped me step out of the comfort zone, knowing that there's somebody else with me on stage, and it would have been more like a conversation rather than just me presenting. So off I went back to my colleague Valerie because it was actually her that I wanted to ask. And what was impressive in this kind of back and forth is that she then decided that it was not for her. She had also done this maybe in a different way, but she had also defined her goals for the year, what she wanted to do less of, what she wanted to do more of, or just kind of what were her goals for the year. And speaking at this conference was not part of her goals. So I guess the message here is that, well, first, let me tell you how it all ended. So she said, it's not really in my goals, so I don't see why. I don't see what we would get out of it. And so the answer is no, thanks. And then I had to decide whether I would still go ahead and do it by myself, 150 people, or if I was going to listen to my brain or my gut instinct and say no and decline this opportunity, which in the end I did. I called the guy and said, look, I'm honored that you asked, but it's just not my thing. So please consider somebody else to do this. So I guess what I'm trying to get across here is that you see how sometimes, even though you know that you're outside of your comfort zone, the ego comes in and says, yeah, but this would really be a great opportunity, 150 people and all the publicity around it. And so then it gets really important to know whether you want to really, step out of your comfort zone, or you can also consider expanding your capacity zone, which is, I guess, what I could have suggested to him, that I just do a smaller event. But in the end, what was also important for me is to really analyze, well, what do I really get out of it? Is this the right audience for me? And that was, I guess, the second factor why I declined the invitation, is because I realized, well, okay, fine. Even if I do step out of my comfort zone, I do present in front of 150 people, but who are these people? They weren't the right people for me. They wasn't the right audience. So I hope this, real example has helped you kind of, I guess, with your own decisions. So yes, sometimes it's good to expand your capacity zone and to, go a little bit further. But if you do, always come back to the basics and analyze, is this really going to help my business? If I do, step out of my comfort zone or expand my capacity zone? Because if it doesn't, then you're just better off doing what you're good at and, growing your business by doing what you're really good at and within your comfort zone. So that's my experience with comfort zones, the ego, and saying no. I highly recommend creating those two lists I mentioned. So what you'd like to do more of, what you'd like to do less of. And I hope this will help you creating a thriving business in 2017. That's it for this episode of the Introvert Biz Growth Podcast. You'll find the full show notes at sarahsantacroce.com/episode 21. And if you don't have it yet, get your free 4-step guide on how to say no to grow. And if you are looking for further resources to run your online business, have a look at my collection of tools I use in my business at sarahsantacroce.com/tools. And if you need help implementing, I'd love to co-create with you, hold your hand, and walk you from a state of overwhelm and frustration to serenity, clarity, and success on your terms. All the details can be found at sarahsantacroce.com/coaching. I look forward to speaking to you again in 2 weeks. Take care.